The pen froze over the document, and I finally signed it. It was the same kind of signature I'd been signing business papers for the last 40 years. The room was silent, with only the muffled hum of the air conditioner. I looked up at the men in suits on the other side of the table. "Congratulations, Mrs. Holloway," said Nathan Frost, the buyer's chief representative. "Holloway Packaging is now officially ours. 17 million has already been transferred to your account." I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness inside. 42 years of my life had just been priced and sold. 42 years that began in a tiny rented warehouse on the outskirts of Richmond. "I hope you will continue to adhere to our quality standards," I said, rising from my chair. "Absolutely," Frost smiled. "We appreciate the reputation you've built, Mrs. Holloway. It's the most important thing we've paid for." My lawyer, Leon Ellison, neatly folded copies of the documents into a folder and handed it to me. "All conditions have been met, Bertha. Congratulations on a successful transaction." I walked out of the conference room that had been mine for 25 years. The staff saw me off with looks, some with sympathy, some with undercurrents of joy. I knew that Frost had promised to keep the staff, but each of them realized that the new owners would bring their own routines. Reaching my own office, I closed the door and stopped in the middle of the room. On the walls were photos, awards, and clippings from industry magazines. The story of a lifetime turned into lines in a sales contract. 17 million. A sum I couldn't even imagine when I started production of the first packaging materials in 1983. I remembered Charles's weeping face before he was rushed to the hospital with a heart attack. He was only 46. I was 42, with a 15-year-old son in my arms and a small business that was barely keeping afloat. "Don't close the company, Bertha," Charles whispered then. "It's our future, our insurance." He died 3 days later, and I had to become both mother and father to Edwin, and sole owner of the shaky business. I remembered sleepless nights over ledgers, negotiating with clients who didn't take a woman seriously in the male-dominated world of industrial packaging, loans at predatory interest rates, a foreclosed house. I started packing my personal belongings. A picture of Charles, young, smiling, with our little Edwin in his arms. A snapshot of the first plant we were able to buy in the 90s. Letters of thanks from big clients. All of these are just memories now. The door opened without a knock. My secretary Paige poked her head into the office. "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Edwin is here to see you." Without waiting for an answer, my son entered the office. Edwin looked like a typical corporate consultant in his 42 years, an expensive but tasteless suit, a fashionable haircut, and a perpetually disgruntled look on his face, as if the world owed him something very valuable. "So you did it after all," he said instead of greeting, looking around the half-deconstructed office. "Hello, Edwin." I continued putting things in the box. "You could have at least warned me that it was signing day. I would have come." "I told you about it last week when we had dinner," I replied calmly. "You said you had some important meeting." Edwin lowered himself into the visitor's chair and put his leg over his foot. "How many did it end up being?" 17, as planned." His eyebrows went up. 17 million? Really? What are you going to do with that kind of money at your age? I heard a familiar note in his voice, a mixture of envy and possessiveness. Edwin had always considered the company his birthright, even though he'd never lifted a finger to help me with it. After college, he refused to work in the family business, calling packaging boring and unpromising. Instead, he changed several jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a couple years, married Celia, had 2 kids, and periodically borrowed money from me for another win-win investment. I'll live, Edwin, travel, doing things I never had time for. Have you thought about us? His tone became accusatory. Celia has business problems. The kids have college coming up. I haven't forgotten about the grandchildren, I said, pulling the last picture off the wall. There would be money for their education. What about me? He asked bluntly. I looked at my son, really looked at him, trying to see the features of the boy Charles and I loved so much. Tall with his father's features, but with a look of perpetual discontent that Charles never had. Edwin, you are 42 years old. You're a grown man with a family. What do you expect me to do? This is a family business, Mom. His voice became softer, almost ingratiating. Dad created it for all of us. I thought when you decided to retire, I'd take over the company. I barely held back a bitter laugh. The company you'd spent the last 20 years calling hopelessly outdated and a relic of the past? The one you refused to work for even for the summer? That's the company I created after your father died, saved from bankruptcy, and turned into something worth $17 million. Alone, Edwin. Without your help. His face darkened. So you're just taking the money for yourself after all we've been through? What have you been through, Edwin? I felt a wave of old resentment rising. Your private school, your prestigious college, the apartment I bought you, your first car, your wedding, your down payment on your house, all paid for with money from a company you thought was unworthy of your attention. Edwin rose from his chair, his face taking on that stubborn expression I knew so well from his teenage years. You've always loved company more than me, he hissed. Even when I was a kid, you spent more time at the factory than at home. An old wound he never missed an opportunity to reopen. Yes, the first years after Charles died were hard. I had to work 16 hours a day to keep the business going. Nannies, housekeepers, the best schools. I provided everything I could for Edwin, but there really wasn't enough time. If I hadn't worked so hard, I said quietly, you wouldn't have high school, college, or a home. We would have lost everything. Those are your excuses, he waved me away. You chose your priorities, now I'm choosing mine. And since you're giving up your family for money so easily, don't be surprised if one day you're alone. Edwin headed for the door but stopped on the threshold. By the way, Celia wanted to know if you wanted to celebrate the sale of the company. She says it's an important event to celebrate with the whole family. I was surprised by this sudden change of tone. 1 second ago, he was practically threatening to break up with me, and now he's inviting me to a family dinner? Celia's suggesting a dinner party? Yeah, she says it's an event that can't be ignored. We can make reservations at Lawrence if you want. Celia and I will be there. The kids, you. It's a family affair. Lawrence's was the most expensive restaurant in Richmond that Edwin had asked him to go to. I'd never been a spender, even when the company started making a serious profit. My generation remembered hard times and wasn't used to throwing money around. But now, looking at the boxes of stuff and the empty walls, I suddenly felt the need to mark the end of this stage of life in some way. Maybe Celia was right. Maybe we really should get together as a family. Okay, I said. Tell Celia I'm in. When does she want to organize the dinner? How about tomorrow night? Edwin suggested quickly. I'll organize it myself. You won't have to worry. His sudden solicitude was alarming, but I shook off suspicion. After all, he is my only son. Perhaps the news of the company's sale has made him reconsider our relationship. Okay, it's a deal. 7 o'clock tonight? Great. Edwin smiled for the first time in the whole conversation. I'll pick you up at 7:30. After he left, I finished packing and took one last look around the office. This was where I had spent most of my life, making hard decisions, overcoming crises, celebrating victories. An office that now belonged to someone else. As I left the building, I nodded to the security guard, Tom, who had worked here for almost 20 years. Everything okay, Mrs. Holloway? He asked. helping me with the boxes. Yes, Tom, it's just weird to realize I'm not coming back here again. You've built a great company, he said sincerely. Everyone's going to miss you. Thanks, Tom. Good luck with the new management. I got in the car and put my hands on the steering wheel, taking my time starting the engine. I remembered the first time Charles had brought me here, when we were just looking at a building to expand the business. One day, Bertha, he had said then, this will be the headquarters of an international company. He didn't live to see that day, but I realized his dream. At home, I was greeted by silence. The large house in suburban Richmond, once filled with voices, now seemed too spacious for a lonely widow. I walked to the study and turned on the computer. The letter from Leon confirmed that the money had indeed arrived in the account, $17 million. An amount that might have seemed fantastic to me just yesterday was now just numbers on a screen. I opened the safe and pulled out the will folder. Now it needed to be updated. Despite the complicated relationship, Edwin had always been the primary heir. I'd set aside money for my grandchildren's education, but the bulk of the fortune was to go to my son. It's a tradition to pass on the wealth to the next generation, but something about today's conversation with Edwin left an unpleasant residue. His claims, his demanding tone, his sudden change of mood after the mention of money. It all made me wonder. I put the folder aside and went to the window. Behind it lay the well-tended garden that had been my refuge for the past few years. Memories flashed before my eyes of when Charles and I had started the business, how enthusiastic he had been about the future of the company he wanted to pass on to his son. Charles was an optimist. He believed in people, in family, that hard work is always rewarded. I was more pragmatic. Life had taught me that you often had to choose between feelings and survival. After his death, I had to become even tougher. I remembered Edwin, then a teenager, screaming in my face, "You're not a mother, you're a robot. You don't care about anyone but your damn company." I got home at 10 that night, having missed his school concert. A broken deal had jeopardized the paychecks of 30 employees, and I had to stay late to save the day. How do you explain that to a 15-year-old boy? Over the years, our relationship only grew more complicated. Edwin grew into a handsome but spoiled young man who thought the world owed him something. He went to a prestigious college that I paid for, then turned down an offer to start a company with the prospect of a management position. Instead, he chipped in with temporary earnings until he met Celia. Celia, at first glance, seemed like a good influence. Organized, ambitious, she pushed Edwin to get his MBA and finally find a stable job as a consultant. They married, had 2 children, and I was hopeful that the relationship with my son would finally improve. But Edwin's family's outward well-being masked problems. He and Celia lived beyond their means. A large house, expensive cars, private schools for the children, exotic vacations. Several times Edwin came to me for temporary help, and I gave money, knowing it would not solve their fundamental problems with financial discipline. The last conversation I had with my son was disturbing. His overt desire to access the money from the sale of the company, the sudden invitation to dinner, too abrupt a change of mood for a man who a moment ago had accused me of never being a good mother to him. I sighed and returned to the table where the will lay. Maybe it was time to reconsider some decisions. Edwin had always been the sole heir, but now with such a large sum in the account, it was worth thinking about diversification. Educational trusts for grandchildren that Edwin and Celia wouldn't be able to control. Perhaps donations to some organizations that were close to Charles and me. A phone call interrupted my musings. It was Leon. "Berta, how are you holding up?" he asked in his deep, soothing voice. "I'm fine, Leon. It's strange to feel without company, but I'll manage." "I'm sure you will. You've always been a strong woman." I just wanted to remind you that we need to discuss investment strategy. 17 million is a lot of money, and it needs to be allocated properly. Oh, and I want to talk about the will, I said. Maybe it's time to make some changes. Sure, Leon sounded cautious. Is something wrong? I'm not sure, I answered honestly. It's just that some things have been on my mind. I understand. Let's meet tomorrow at my office. Say 11 o'clock? I can't tomorrow, I remembered. I have dinner with Edwin's family. The day after tomorrow. It's a deal. Take care of yourself, Berta. And congratulations again. You deserve this success. After my conversation with Leon, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the future. For the first time in decades, there was nothing in front of me. No schedule of meetings, no urgent decisions, no responsibility for hundreds of employees. Just me and time, which was suddenly too much. I walked to the bedroom and pulled an old photo album from the dresser. Flipping through the pages of yellowed pictures, I mentally went back in time. Here's Charles and I at the opening of the first warehouse. Here's little Edwin in his father's arms. Here's our first serious customer shaking my hand. Here's the plant expansion, new equipment, the first big award in the industry. The story of a lifetime, captured in photographs, a life that is now over, giving way to something new and unknown. I closed the album and put it back on the shelf. Tomorrow would be a new day. Tomorrow I will wake up for the first time in 40 years without having to go to work. Tomorrow my new life will begin, and the first step in it will be dinner with my family at Lawrence's to celebrate the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. I didn't know then how much that dinner would change everything. The Lawrence shone with lights like a beacon in the twilight of the coming evening. The marble columns at the entrance, the austere sign with gilded letters, everything spoke of a claim to exclusivity. I didn't like places like this. I always preferred modest family restaurants, where the taste of the food was more important than the price on the menu. But tonight was a special occasion. Edwin pulled up to the entrance, where a helpful valet opened the door. "Good evening, Mrs. Holloway," he smiled at me with genuine respect. I absently adjusted my pearl necklace, Charles's 20th anniversary gift to me. "Don't be nervous, Mom." Edwin put his hand on my shoulder. "Tonight is your night." I looked at my son carefully. There was a strange nervousness in his voice, which he tried to hide behind a careless smile. His hair was too neatly styled, his new suit, the expensive cufflinks I'd given him last Christmas. He looked like a man trying very hard to impress. The maitre d' met us at the entrance and, after checking the list, led us through the main room to a separate alcove at the back of the restaurant. Lawrence's was famous for its private areas where wealthy customers could celebrate important events without attracting the attention of other diners. Our table was set with a snow-white tablecloth with silverware and crystal glasses that caught the light and scattered soft sparkles. In the center stood an arrangement of white lilies, my favorite flowers. I was surprised. Edwin could hardly remember such details. "Mrs. Holloway." Celia stepped up to meet us. Her tight, dark blue dress emphasized her figure, which had been preserved despite her two children. Her makeup was flawless, her hair perfect. My sister-in-law always looked like she just stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. Sitting next to her were my grandchildren, 15-year-old Olivia, an almost grown-up girl with long hair and an elaborate updo, and 13-year-old Liam, a serious boy in a suit, clearly uncomfortable in formal wear. "Grandma." Olivia jumped up and hugged me. She smelled like expensive perfume, too mature for her age. "You look amazing." "Thank you, honey." I hugged my granddaughter back, wondering when she'd gotten so big. "You look great, too." Liam just nodded, smiling demurely. He'd always been more reserved than his sister. In that, he and I were alike. I'm so glad you agreed to celebrate with us. Celia kissed my cheek, a wave of floral scent wafting over me. It's such an important event. Yes, Edwin nodded, pulling back a chair for me. It's not every day you sell a company for 17 million. He said the amount louder than necessary, and I noticed a few heads at neighboring tables turn in our direction. I felt embarrassed. I'd never been a fan of flaunting my financial status. Let's not talk about money at dinner, I suggested softly, unfolding my napkin. Why not? Edwin objected, filling his glasses with wine that, judging by the label, was worth at least several $100s a bottle. It's cause for celebration. You're finally free of this company and can enjoy life. I've always enjoyed life, Edwin, I replied calmly. The company was part of that enjoyment. Of course it was, Edwin grinned, glancing over at Celia. 16-hour workdays, constant stress, endless negotiations, a real pleasure. For some people, work is a calling, I said, sipping my water. I never liked wine, preferring to stay clear-headed. I liked creating something of value, providing jobs, solving complex problems. Oh, let's not talk about work, Celia interjected, clearly trying to break the tension. Why don't you tell me how the signing went? Everything went smoothly? Without a hitch, I replied. Frost turned out to be a nice man. He promised to keep the core staff and the company philosophy. And you believed him? Edwin chuckled. As soon as you left, he must have started planning layoffs and restructuring. Maybe, I shrugged, but that's not my concern anymore. A waiter approached us, a young man with impeccable manners and a memorable face. Good evening, my name is Taylor, and I'll be your waiter tonight. Let me tell you about our specialties. As Taylor described the chef's exquisite culinary creations, I watched my family. Celia listened attentively, occasionally glancing at the prices on the menu. Edwin leaned back in his chair with a look of familiarity, though I doubted he'd been to many of these places. Olivia was furtively taking pictures of the interior on her phone, probably for social media. Liam just sat there with a detached look, studying the other diners. I'll have the New York steak, medium rare, Edwin said as the waiter finished his presentation. For me, salmon with truffle sauce. Celia closed the menu. The children chose pasta and chicken fillet, while I settled for scallop with seasonal vegetables, the lightest dish on the menu. And a bottle of Chateau Margaux, Edwin added, not looking at the price. I'll get it right away. Taylor nodded, picking up the menu. Edwin, this wine is too expensive, I said quietly as the waiter stepped away. Mom, today's a special day, he said. We're celebrating your success. Don't you deserve better? I do, I agreed. But I'd rather you didn't spend so much money on wine I won't even drink. It's for the atmosphere, Celia interjected. And besides, bottles like that are a great investment. They only get more expensive over time. I could hardly refrain from commenting. Celia and her investments were a separate topic. In the 10 years of her marriage to Edwin, she had launched and closed 3 businesses: a designer clothing boutique, an interior design studio, and an event management agency. Each time the reason for failure, she says, was unfavorable market conditions or incompetent partners. Never her own mistakes or lack of business acumen. Grandma, is it true that you're a millionaire now? Olivia asked bluntly, putting the phone away. Olivia, Celia shouted at her. That's not the way to ask. It's okay, I smiled at my granddaughter. Yes, the sale of the company brought a significant amount of money, but it's not the amount of money that matters. It's how you use it. And how do you plan to use it? Edwin asked, as if casually. I have a few ideas, I answered evasively. I want to provide for Olivia and Liam's education, maybe travel a little. The rest should be invested wisely. That's a reasonable approach, Celia nodded. Speaking of investments, I'm just exploring some interesting opportunities for my new business project. Maybe you'd be interested? I sighed inwardly, another of Celia's promising businesses. What are we talking about this time? I'm thinking of opening a chain of organic cosmetics boutiques. Her eyes lit up. The market is huge, and there is almost no competition. I already have a business plan, potential suppliers. That sounds interesting, I replied politely. But let's discuss it some other time, shall we? Tonight, I'd just like to enjoy an evening with my family. Of course, of course. Celia smiled, strained. I just thought you might be interested in a new business, something to keep you busy in retirement. I'll find something to do, I assured her. The waiter brought appetizers, beef carpaccio for Edwin, goat cheese salad for Celia, quesadillas for the kids, and crab soup for me. The food was excellent, I had to admit. Mother, you do realize, don't you, that at your age, you have to think about the future? Edwin began again, cutting the meat. About how to manage your inheritance, for instance. Edwin, I'm only 67. I looked him in the eye. I'm not gonna die anytime soon. Of course not. He held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. That's not what I mean. It's just that such a large sum of money requires proper management, tax planning, asset structuring. I have Leon, I reminded him. He's an excellent financial and tax advisor. Leon's old school, Edwin grumbled. There are different approaches now, different opportunities. I know some excellent specialists in large capital management. I'll think about it, I replied, though I had no intention of changing Leon, who had handled my affairs flawlessly for 30 years. You always say that when you don't want to discuss a topic. Edwin shook his head. I'll think about it. And then you do it your way. That's my right, I said calmly. It's my money and my decisions. But those decisions affect the whole family, he objected. The children's future, for example. I told him I'd take care of their education. I glanced at the grandchildren, who pretended not to be listening to our conversation. Liam, Olivia, have you thought about where you want to go after high school? I want to go to Princeton, Olivia answered immediately. Communications or maybe business? Princeton's a good choice, I agreed. What about you, Liam? My youngest grandson looked away from his pasta for a moment. I haven't decided yet, he said quietly. Maybe something to do with programming or engineering. You still have time to think about it, I smiled at him. It's important to choose something you really like. The main thing is that it should be promising, Celia intervened. There's so much competition in the labor market now. At 13, you don't need to think about the job market, I said softly. You need to develop your talents and find your interests. That's not practical. Celia shook her head. In today's world, you have to plan your career from an early age. I noticed Liam's head lowered even further over his plate. I felt sorry for my grandson. That kind of pressure seemed excessive at his age. The waiter removed the empty plates and brought out the main courses. The aroma of herbs and spices filled the air around our table. It looks delicious, Celia said, eyeing her salmon. Edwin took to the steak with enthusiasm, forgetting for a moment about money and inheritance. I tasted the scallop, tender, perfectly cooked, with a slight flavor of the sea. Looking around, I noticed how exquisitely decorated the restaurant was. Dim lighting, creating an intimate atmosphere. Dark wood paneling on the walls. Original artwork. Fresh flowers on every table. In the far corner of the room, a small orchestra was playing soft jazz music. Several couples were already dancing on the small dance floor. At neighboring tables sat people who looked like they spent every Friday here, confident, with impeccable manners and expensive accessories. A world I'd never aspired to belong to, despite my success in business. Grandma, Olivia leaned across the table to me. Have you really never traveled to Europe? Really, I smiled. Always been too busy with company. That's terrible, Olivia exclaimed with the drama of a teenager. You should definitely go. My class and I went to Paris last year, and it was magical. I think your grandmother will be able to travel now, Celia said. If you want, we could go together, Edwin suggested, blotting his lips with a napkin. The whole family. Rome, Paris, London, whatever you want. I looked at my son in surprise. Over the past few years, we could barely manage a family dinner once a month, let alone a trip together. It's an interesting proposition, I replied cautiously. But I think I should try traveling on my own first. Get used to the new rhythm of life. At your age, it's better not to travel alone, Edwin objected. I don't know what could happen. I'll be fine. I raised my voice slightly. I've run a company with hundreds of employees, and I think I can handle booking tickets and hotel rooms. That's not what I meant. Edwin shook his head. Health, safety. My health is fine. I cut him off. And as for safety, I'm not going into dangerous neighborhoods. Celia put her hand on Edwin's shoulder, as if to keep him from making a harsh reply. Bertha, we're just worried about you, she said in her gentlest tone. After all these years of work, you deserve comfort and care. Let us help you. I looked at my sister-in-law carefully. There was concern in her eyes, but it wasn't about me, I could tell, about something else. Then I shifted my gaze to Edwin, who was doing his best to play the caring son. Something in their behavior alarmed me, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Suddenly, I noticed them exchanging quick glances when they thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't the first such silent exchange of the evening. Their eyes read impatience, as if they were waiting for something. I lowered my gaze to my untouched glass of juice, which Edwin had urged me to order. The strange concern for my drinks, the unusual generosity, the constant talk of money. Something was definitely wrong. The waiter brought desserts, dainty cakes for Celia and the children, a cheese plate for Edwin, a fruit platter for me. The conversation turned to more neutral topics. Liam and Olivia's school, the latest city news, plans for summer vacation. But the tension didn't go away. I noticed Edwin and Celia exchanging occasional glances when they thought I couldn't see. Grandma, have you ever heard me play the piano? Olivia asked, finishing her chocolate fudge brownie. No, dear. I smiled at my granddaughter, but I heard from your mom that you're making great progress. Why don't you play us something? Edwin suggested, pointing to the grand piano in the corner of the room. Duh. I'm sure the administration won't mind. Olivia brightened. Is it really okay? Of course, Edwin called the maitre d' and said something quietly. He nodded and stepped back. See? No problem. Then I'll play my grandmother my favorite play. Olivia stood up from the table. Claire de Lune Debussy. I just learned it for the spring concert. Excellent choice, Celia approved. Come on, Liam, let's go support your sister. We should definitely film this. Edwin pulled out his phone. Olivia's first performance at the Lawrence. They headed for the piano, leaving me alone at the table. I watched as Olivia sat down confidently at the instrument, and Edwin, Celia, and Liam stood next to her. Celia said something to a waiter passing by, pointing in my direction. He nodded and a moment later brought me another glass of juice. Mrs. Holloway, your sister-in-law, ordered fresh pomegranate juice for you, he said, setting the glass on the table. Thank you, but I have more. I pointed to my nearly untouched drink. She insisted on bringing you a fresh one. The waiter smiled, said the previous one might not be so cold anymore. I nodded, feeling increasingly perplexed by this strange concern for my drinks. The waiter took the old glass and left. The new juice looked and smelled exactly the same, but somehow made me instinctively distrustful. Olivia began to play. The gentle flowing sounds of Debussy's Moonlight spilled into the hall, causing several customers to turn around. My granddaughter played well, not flawlessly, but with real feeling. I saw Edwin filming her on his phone and Celia watching her daughter with a proud smile. Liam stood a little to the side, immersed in his own thoughts. This almost idyllic picture made me feel strangely sad. This is what a real family should look like: loving, supportive, rejoicing in each other's successes. But behind all that facade, I sensed a falseness. There was no sincerity in Edwin and Celia's concern, only calculation. Olivia wasn't playing for me, but for the audience. Only Liam seemed real silent, withdrawn, but honest. I didn't know why, but I suddenly remembered the day Edwin turned 12. I planned to take the day off to spend with him all day. I ordered a huge cake, invited his friends, and bought him the gift he'd been dreaming of, a new bicycle. But in the morning, our main customer called and said he was canceling the contract because of a defective batch. This could have ruined us. I remember explaining to Edwin that I had to leave for a while, promising to be back by the time the party started. I remember his face, disappointed but understanding. "It's all right, Mother," he said then. "The company is more important." I didn't return until the evening, when the guests had already left. I had managed to salvage the contract, but I had missed my son's birthday. Edwin was sitting alone in his room, going through gifts from friends. When I walked in, he didn't even look up. "I'm sorry," I said then. "I had to." "I know," he interrupted. "The company is more important. You always say that." From that day on, something changed between us. A crack appeared that only widened over the years. I tried to make it up to him with expensive gifts, better schools, support for his every endeavor, but I could never regain the trust I lost that day. The music faded, and the applause brought me back to the present. Olivia bowed to the small audience, glowing with pride. Edwin was saying something to the maitre d', pointing to the dance floor. He nodded and headed toward the orchestra. A moment later, the musicians began to play a slow, romantic tune. Edwin held up Celia's hand, inviting her to dance. Olivia pulled Liam with her, and soon all four of them were spinning on the dance floor with the other couples. I was alone at the table, watching them from afar. Edwin and Celia danced too perfectly, as if they were practicing a learned routine. Olivia was laughing, trying to teach a clumsy Liam some simple moves. They looked like a normal, happy family, enjoying an evening at an expensive restaurant. No outsider would have noticed the tension I'd felt all evening. My gaze fell to the untouched glass of juice. Something in Edwin and Celia's demeanor made me distrust the drink. Their insistence, their strange glances, their sudden desire to leave me alone. I pushed the glass away from me. Suddenly I noticed that a tall man in a strict black suit, judging by the earpiece and badge, one of the restaurant's security guards, was walking toward me. He walked purposefully toward my table, keeping his eyes on me. My heart sped up for some reason. "Dash Mrs. Holloway?" he asked quietly, leaning toward me. "Yes, that's me." "I'm sorry to bother you," he said in almost a whisper, looking around. "Dash, my name is Reed Bradford, and I'm in charge of security at the Lawrence. I need to tell you something. Personal." I tensed, waiting for it to continue. "I've been watching your table since the beginning of the evening," he continued. "It's part of my job to keep an eye on all the guests. And I saw your son put something in your juice while you were talking to the waiter. It was like the world stopped." I stared at the guard, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Are you sure?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Absolutely, ma'am." Reed nodded. I was standing at the pillar, and I could see clearly. He pulled something from his inside jacket pocket, a small vial or bottle, and quickly poured the contents into your drink as you turned away. He then said something to his wife, and they soon suggested that everyone dance. I felt the blood drain from my face. My own son, my own flesh and blood. The man I had raised, loved, sacrificed everything for. I don't know what it was, the guard continued, but I felt it my duty to warn you. It may be some kind of harmless joke, but a harmless joke? I grinned bitterly. Putting something in someone else's drink isn't a joke, it's a crime. I agree with you, ma'am. Reed nodded. That's why I came over. Do you want me to call the police? I glanced toward the dance floor, where Edwin and Celia continued to dance, glancing in my direction occasionally. They looked concerned that I was talking to a security guard. No, I said firmly. I don't need the police. Not yet, anyway. Whatever you say. Reed straightened up. But I'd recommend not drinking anything that's brought or offered to you. Don't worry, I won't. I looked him in the eye. Thank you. Why did you decide to help me? Reed smiled slightly. Dash. My mother is also a single woman of age, and I wish someone had warned her if she was in a similar situation. He nodded and stepped back, taking a position by the column from where he could watch the entire hall. I remained seated, shaken to the core. My thoughts raced erratically in my head, trying to find a rational explanation for what I'd just learned. Why would Edwin put something in my drink? What could it have been? A sleeping pill? A laxative? Something more dangerous? And most importantly, why? Was 17 million really reason enough to commit such treachery? I looked at the dance floor again. Now Edwin was dancing with Olivia and Celia was dancing with Liam. They looked like a normal family enjoying the evening, but now I saw them in a completely different light. What did the kids know? Were they aware of their parents' plan? Olivia seemed too unconcerned and Liam seemed too withdrawn to realize what was going on. The music changed to a faster track. I saw Celia say something insistent to Edwin, pointing in my direction. He nodded and, leaving Olivia with her brother, headed toward our table. Is everything okay, Mom? He asked with feigned concern. You look a little pale. I'm fine, I said calmly. I'm just a little tired. Why don't you have some juice? He pointed to an untouched glass. It'll give you a boost. I looked at my son, trying to see him as the little boy I'd once loved so much. But in front of me stood a stranger, calculating, cold, willing to do anything for money. No, thank you, I said. I think I'm getting a migraine. Maybe I should go home. What? No, Mom, the evening's just begun. Edwin looked worried. We haven't even had a toast to your success yet. Let's at least make a toast. He raised his wine glass and held out my juice to me. I didn't take it. I'm sorry, Edwin, but I'm really not feeling well. Maybe some other time. But we specifically organized this evening for you. He was beginning to lose patience. Celia had worked so hard. The children were so excited. I appreciate it, I said firmly. But if I stayed, I'd only spoil the mood with my migraine. I'd rather go home and rest. How will you get there? I dropped you off. I'll call a cab. I pulled out my phone. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Edwin looked annoyed and worried at the same time. Okay, if you insist. But why don't you at least have some juice before you go? It's a shame to leave it behind. It's freshly squeezed, just for you. His insistence only reinforced my belief that the guard was right. No, thanks. It's just making my headache worse. Edwin looked like he wanted to say something, but he held back. Instead, he gave a strained smile. All right, Mom. Let me at least walk you to the cab. No need. I got up from the table. Keep having fun. I'll be fine on my own. But Mom, I said no need. My tone left no room for objection. I grabbed my purse and headed for the exit without looking back. As I passed Reed's guard, I nodded gratefully. He responded with a barely perceptible nod, continuing to scan the room with a professional eye. Outside, I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. My head was really starting to hurt, but not from a migraine, from the realization of betrayal. I hailed a cab and called my address. In the car, I looked back at the lighted windows of the Lawrence. My family was still there, dancing, eating expensive desserts, probably discussing a failed plan. What were they going to do? Put me to sleep and make me sign some paperwork? Or something worse? The cab pulled away, taking me away from the restaurant, from my family, from my illusions. I stared at the lights of Richmond passing by and felt not only the pain, but also the determination building inside me. Edwin had made an unforgivable mistake. He'd forgotten who his mother was, forgot that I'm not just an old woman with money. I'm Bertha Holloway, a woman who built a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up, a woman who survived in a world of business sharks without losing herself. My phone began to vibrate. Edwin. I dropped the call. A minute later, a text came through. Mom, are you okay? We're worried. I didn't answer. Another call, another message. I turned my phone off. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know how I would handle this betrayal. But I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't over. It was just the beginning. When the cab pulled up to my house, I paid and slowly walked down the path to the porch. The garden I loved so much now seemed alien and cold. The front door seemed unreliable. The whole world had changed in one evening. I entered the house and turned on the light. The silence enveloped me, but it didn't bring peace. I walked into the living room and sank into a chair without taking off my coat. The clock on the mantel showed 8:30 in the evening. It had only been 30 minutes since I'd left the restaurant, but it felt like a lifetime. I sat in my chair, looking at the silent phone. After I turned it on, it burst into a series of calls and messages, all from Edwin. I read a few. Mom, did you make it home? Why aren't you answering? We're worried. Call me when you can. With each successive message, the tone became more insistent, almost panicked. The clock read 9 p.m., exactly 30 minutes since I'd left the restaurant, 30 minutes that had turned my life upside down. My hand reached for the phone, but I stopped myself. What could I say to Edwin? I know you tried to poison me. Why did you betray me? How could you? All these questions sounded naive and pointless. I knew the answer perfectly well. Money. $17 million was more than enough money to turn my son into a traitor. I rose from my chair and walked to the kitchen. My hands shook as I poured water into a glass. My throat was dry, but the water didn't help. The bitterness of betrayal couldn't be washed away. The phone rang again. This time it was Celia. I dismissed the call and muted it. I needed to think, to decide what to do next. I suppressed my first impulse to call the police almost immediately. What would I say? I had no proof, only the restaurant guard's word. Edwin could easily deny it, call me paranoid, write it off as a senile fantasy. Poor Mom, she gets suspicious as she gets older. I walked back into the living room and went to the window. The dark street was empty, with only the street lights casting yellow circles of light on the sidewalk. At times like this, you feel your loneliness most keenly. My whole life has been spent fighting, working, taking care of the company. I've sacrificed the personal for the business, for the future, mine and Edwin's. And here it is, my future, an empty house and a son who sees me only as a wallet. On the table next to the chair was a picture of Edwin on the day he graduated from college, diploma in hand, proud and happy. I looked at the picture and didn't recognize the smiling young man as the man who had tried to slip something into my drink today. My gaze fell on the phone book next to the picture, an old-fashioned thing in the age of smartphones, but I always preferred to have important numbers on paper. My fingers automatically began flipping through the pages until I found the entry I wanted. Leon Ellison and his home number. Leon wasn't just my lawyer. In 30 years of working together, he had become a close friend, perhaps the only real friend I could name. He knew everything about my business, from legal intricacies to personal stories. He'd helped me through some of my toughest times: when Charles died, when the company teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, when Edwin was going through his rebellious teenage years. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. It took forever to ring until finally a familiar deep voice came through. Leon Ellison speaking. Leon, it's Berta. My voice sounded strained, even to myself. Berta? His tone was immediately alarmed. What's wrong? Are you okay? No, I'm not. I took a deep breath. I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you now. It's important. Of course, he answered without hesitation. Do you want me to come to you? No. I glanced out the window, as if I expected to see Edwin there. I'd rather come to your place. It's safer. Safer? His voice became even more anxious. Berta, you're scaring me. What's going on? I'll tell you when I see you. Are you home? Yes, I am. Come over. I'll be waiting. I finished talking and quickly went up to the bedroom. After changing into more comfortable clothes, I took my bag and car keys and headed for the garage. As soon as I got behind the wheel, I remembered that I'd had a glass of wine at the restaurant. It had been hours ago, though, and I felt completely sober. The fear and adrenaline had washed even a hint of alcohol out of my blood. As I drove out of the garage, I noticed the headlights of an approaching car. Instinctively, I extinguished my lights and stopped. The car slowly drove past the house and stopped a little farther away. I recognized Edwin's silver Audi. He had come to see if I was home, or perhaps to finish what had failed at the restaurant. I waited until he got out of the car and headed for the front door, then quickly pulled out of the garage on the other side of the house and left the street without turning on my headlights until I turned the corner. In the rearview mirror, I saw Edwin turn around at the sound of the engine, but it was too late. I was around the corner. Leon's house was in West Hampton, one of Richmond's older upscale neighborhoods. The 30-minute drive seemed interminable. I kept checking the rearview mirror for fear of seeing a silver Audi, but the road behind me was empty. As I pulled up to Leon's house, an elegant Victorian mansion surrounded by a manicured garden, I felt the tension release a little. I was safe here. Leon was waiting for me on the porch. A tall, trim man with a neatly trimmed gray beard and shrewd blue eyes. At 72, he looked younger than many 60-year-olds and retained the sharp mind that had made him one of Virginia's best lawyers. Bertha. He walked down the steps to open the car door. I was getting worried. I'm sorry to have disturbed you so late, I said as I got out of the car. Stop it. He took my hand gently. I'm always on call for you. You know that. We walked into the house. Leon's spacious living room, filled with bookcases and antique furniture, always had a calming effect on me. A fire burned in the fireplace, spreading a pleasant warmth. Have a seat. Leon pointed to the chair by the fireplace. Would you like something to drink? Tea, coffee, maybe a whiskey? Tea, please. I sank into the chair, feeling the fatigue come in waves. Leon nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. He returned a few minutes later with a tray containing a teapot, 2 cups, and a plate of cookies. So, he said, pouring the tea, tell me what happened. I took a deep breath and began the story with dinner at the Lawrence. I described Edwin and Celia's strange behavior, their unusual preoccupation with my drinks, their persistent talk of money and inheritance. Then I turned to the guard's warning and my hasty departure from the restaurant. Leon listened without interrupting, only his eyes grew more serious and his face darker. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, pondering what I'd heard. Are you sure the guard wasn't mistaken? He finally asked. He was absolutely sure. I shook my head. And then it explained all of Edwin and Celia's strange behavior, their insistence on the drinks, their sudden desire to leave me alone at the table, their panic when I refused to drink the juice and decided to leave. Yeah, that sounds about right. Leon set the cup down on the table. The question is, what exactly did he put in and why? Isn't it obvious? I grinned bitterly. Money. 17 million was motive enough. But how exactly did he plan to gain access to the money? Leon frowned. Put you to sleep and force you to sign some documents? That's too risky and primitive. I don't know. I shook my head. Maybe he wanted me to pass out and then blame everything on my age, insist on a medical examination, declare me incompetent? Maybe, Leon nodded, but that would require serious medical reports, evidence of a long-term inability to make decisions. One episode isn't enough. Then I don't understand. I could feel the fatigue and stress taking its toll. Why would he do that? Leon stood up and paced the room, his hands behind his back, his usual posture when he was deep in thought. Let's be logical, he said. Edwin and Celia find out that you sold the company for 17 million. They realize that you're probably not going to give them all the money at once. Perhaps they're in some kind of financial trouble? I wondered. Edwin had borrowed large sums of money from me several times in the last year. He said it was for investments, but he wouldn't give specific details. And Celia was always launching new businesses that were quickly going out of business. That's what I thought. Leon nodded. They could be in desperate straits, debts, loans, but that's no excuse for what he did. Of course not, Leon agreed softly. I'm just trying to understand the motives. He went back to his chair and sat down, leaning forward. Berta, we have to proceed with caution. We have no direct evidence that Edwin was trying to hurt you. Just the word of a restaurant security guard. You don't believe me? I felt a pang of resentment. I believe you completely, Leon said firmly. But if we want to take any legal action, we need proof. Otherwise, it'll be your word against his. And what do you suggest? Leon rubbed his chin thoughtfully. First of all, you should check your health. Take tests to make sure you didn't swallow something dangerous in the restaurant. Second, you need to find out exactly what Edwin was trying to slip you. How? I couldn't help it. It's not like I took the juice with me. Maybe the guard kept it, Leon suggested. Judging by his behavior, he's a responsible man. I can contact the restaurant in the morning. He got up and went to the desk, took out a notebook and a pen. Give me the name of this security guard. Reed Bradford, I remembered. Leon wrote it down and walked back to his chair. Good. Now we need to think about your safety. From the looks of it, Edwin won't stop at one attempt. Do you think he might try again? I shuddered. I don't know, Leon answered honestly. But it's better to be safe. Maybe you should stay here for a few days. I have plenty of room, and I'd love the company. I smiled at his concern. Leon had always been like that. Reliable, thoughtful, helpful. Thank you, but I don't want to burden you. It's not a burden, he countered. Besides, it would make me feel better. I thought about it. The offer was tempting. The prospect of spending the night alone in a big, empty house, knowing that Edwin might come at any moment, was not appealing. All right, I finally agreed, but only for a couple of days, until we get the situation straightened out. Great. Leon looked pleased. I'll get the guest room ready. In the meantime, let's think about what Edwin might be planning. He started pacing around the room again. Something doesn't add up, he muttered. If Edwin wanted control of your finances, it would be easier for him to go through the courts to prove your incapacity. But that would require a good reason, which you don't have. You're perfectly healthy, mentally and physically. Maybe he was counting on me not remembering anything about the evening, I suggested. Slipped me something to induce amnesia, and then he could convince me that I'd agreed to hand over control of the money to him? Maybe, Leon nodded. But again, a legally binding decision requires documents, signatures, witnesses. It's not easy to do that in a restaurant. What if he was planning something more radical? I struggled to say the words. Leon stopped and looked at me anxiously. You mean? I don't know what I mean. I shook my head. I'm just trying to see what my son is capable of. Yesterday, I would have said he would never do anything to hurt me. And today, Leon came and sat next to me, taking my hands in his. Berta, let's not jump to conclusions. We don't know what Edwin was planning, and we don't know what was in that drink. It's probably some harmless sleeping pill, so you'd just fall asleep and he could drive you home, making it look like you'd had too much to drink. Why? I don't get it. To make you look bad in front of the others. To make it seem like you were losing control, becoming unpredictable. It could be the first step in a longer-term strategy. That theory sounded plausible. Edwin had always been prone to manipulation, ever since he was a teenager. He had a knack for making himself look like a victim of circumstance and blaming others for his problems. That makes sense, I nodded. But it's still a betrayal? Absolutely, Leon agreed. And we should be prepared that this is just the beginning. My phone, which was on the table, vibrated again. The screen showed that Edwin was calling. I glanced at Leon. Don't answer it, he advised. Let him think you're asleep or don't want to talk. Don't let him know you suspect anything. I nodded and dismissed the call. A minute later, a message came through. Mom, I came to your house, but you're not here. Where are you? We are all very worried. He was at my house, I told Leon. I saw him pull up as I was leaving. You were right to leave. Leon frowned. But now he knows you're not home, and he might start looking for you. Do you think he'll look for me here? I don't think so. Leon shook his head. He doesn't know that you've made me aware of your suspicions. But just in case, I'll call Martin. Your son? I wondered. Yes, Leon nodded. He's in town now, visiting old friends. I'll ask him to come and stay with us. He's ex-military, and his presence would be an extra assurance of safety. I felt uncomfortable at the thought of causing such trouble. Leon, this is too much. I don't think Edwin is capable of violence. I hope so too, Leon said seriously. But it's better to be safe. Besides, Martin will be glad to see you. He always spoke warmly of you. I smiled weakly. Martin, Leon's son, was a good man, straightforward, honest, not at all like my Edwin. Sometimes I found myself wishing I had a son like that. Trustworthy, loyal, without the eternal lust for easy money. Leon took out his cell phone and went into the other room to call his son. I was alone, staring at the fire in the fireplace and thinking about how everything had gone wrong. Where had I made a mistake in raising Edwin? What had turned the sweet boy I loved so much into a man capable of betraying his own mother? Maybe I really did pay too much attention to work. Maybe I should have been around him more often, more interested in his life, less pressure. Or vice versa, to be stricter, not to indulge his whims, not to save him from the consequences of his mistakes. The phone vibrated again. This time it was Celia. I rejected the call. A message came next. Berta, we're all very worried. Edwin went to your house, but you're not there. Please let me know you're okay. Their concern seemed so fake. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the money they stood to lose if something happened to me before they got control of my fortune. Leon returned to the living room. Martin will be here in an hour, he informed me. In the meantime, let's think about practical steps. He sat down opposite me and took out his notebook again. First, we need to secure your finances. I suggest we temporarily block any major transactions from your accounts. Second, we need to review your will and powers of attorney, if any. Edwin doesn't have power of attorney to manage my affairs, I said. I've never seen the need for one. That's good, Leon nodded. What about a will? Most of the estate should go to Edwin, I sighed. With educational trusts for the grandchildren, I think we should reconsider those provisions, Leon suggested cautiously. Considering the circumstances, I closed my eyes. The thought of disinheriting my only son was almost physically painful. But did I have a choice? A man who was willing to hurt me for money wasn't trustworthy. You're right, I finally said. We'll revise the will, but I want to keep the trusts for my grandchildren. They're not to blame for what their parents did. That's a sensible solution, Leon approved. We can structure the trusts so that Edwin and Celia won't have access to them. The money would only be available to the children when they reach a certain age or to pay for their education. That's exactly what I want, I nodded. Good, Leon made a note in his notebook. Now the next question is, what to do with Edwin? I took a deep breath. It was a question that had plagued me since the moment I'd left the restaurant. I don't know, I admitted honestly. Part of me wants a confrontation, wants to look him in the eye and ask him how he could. The other part of me just wants to disappear, start a new life somewhere far away where he can't find me. Both options have their pros and cons, Leon said thoughtfully. Confrontation will give you a chance to say everything you've accumulated, perhaps to understand his motives, but it will be emotionally difficult, and there's no guarantee that he'll admit his guilt. And disappear? I asked. It would give you a clean slate, a chance to start over, without the weight of the past. Leon shrugged. But it would also mean leaving everything behind. A house, memories, maybe some friends. I wondered, what was keeping me in Richmond now that the company was gone? A house full of memories, many of which were painful. A few female buddies I saw once a month at lunch. A son who only saw me as a source of money. Maybe I really should leave, I said quietly. Start a new life somewhere by the ocean. I've always dreamed of living near the water. That's possible? Leon nodded. With your money, you can afford a nice house anywhere, but don't make any rash decisions. Give yourself time to think, to weigh the pros and cons. You're right, I smiled weakly, always so judicious. One of us has to be. He winked. The doorbell rang. Leon glanced at his watch. Strange, Martin should be here in half an hour. He got up and headed for the front door. I tensed, gripped by a sudden fear. What if it was Edwin? What if he somehow knew where I was? Leon seemed to be thinking the same thing. Wait here, he said, and went out into the hallway. I heard him go to the door and ask, "Who's there?" A muffled conversation followed, and Leon came back into the living room with a relieved expression on his face. "It's Martin," he said. He arrived earlier than promised. I spent the next 2 days at Leon's house, surrounded by care I hadn't felt in years. Martin, Leon's son, proved to be as reliable and attentive as his father. He was a tall, trim man of about 50, with a military bearing and a calm, confident look. He didn't ask too many questions, but I felt his silent support. Edwin called every few hours. I didn't answer, but I read the messages, which grew more insistent and anxious. "Mom, where are you? We're all freaking out with worry. If you don't answer, I'll call the police." The last message particularly amused Leon. "Let him call them," he said, looking at the text. What would he tell them? My mother disappeared after I tried to put something in her drink. Leon and I devised a plan of action. The first thing he did was contact the Lawrence administration and talk to the security guard, Reed Bradford. To my relief, Reed actually kept the juice glass, anticipating that it might be needed as evidence. Leon arranged for the contents to be analyzed by a private laboratory with which he had collaborated for many years. The second step was to change my will. We spent several hours scrutinizing every detail. I decided to leave Edwin only the minimum amount required by law, so that he could not contest the will on the grounds that he was completely excluded. I divided the bulk of my inheritance between educational trusts for my grandchildren and several charitable organizations I had supported over the years. The third step was to ensure my financial security. Leon helped me temporarily block the ability to make large transactions from all accounts without my personal presence and a special password. On the third day of my stay with Leon, the results of the drink test came back. We were sitting in his home office when the phone rang. "Yes, this is Leon Ellison," he answered on speakerphone so I could hear. "Yes, I see. Are you sure? Okay, send me the full report by email. Thank you." He hung up the phone and looked at me with a grim expression. "The results are in," he said. The juice contained a powerful sleeping drug, zolpidem, at about twice the therapeutic dose. I felt the blood drain from my face. Is it dangerous? In such a dose, Leon checked the records. Not fatal for a healthy person, but would cause deep sleep, possibly followed by amnesia. Dangerous in combination with alcohol, which intensifies the effects of the drug. And you had a glass of wine. I could have passed out in the restaurant, I said quietly. Exactly, Leon nodded. And at your age, such a dose could have caused more serious consequences, breathing problems, heart rhythm. I closed my eyes, trying to realize the magnitude of the betrayal. My own son was willing to risk my health, perhaps even my life, for money. "What now?" I asked, opening my eyes. "Are we going to the police?" Leon hesitated. "We could, but without Edwin's confession, it would be hard to prove that he was the one who spiked the drug. The guards saw him put something in the drink, but he can't confirm that it was zolpidem. So he's gonna get away with it?" I felt bitter. "Legally, maybe," Leon admitted, "but that doesn't mean he won't face the consequences of his actions." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. While we were waiting for the results of the analysis, I did a little research into Edwin's financial situation. I have a friend in the banking industry who was able to provide some information without breaking confidentiality. He opened the folder. The situation is worse than we thought. Edwin is up to his eyeballs in debt: mortgage, car loans, consumer loans, credit card debt, about $800,000 in total. $800,000? I couldn't believe my ears. How had he managed to save that much money? Apparently, he and Celia were living way beyond their means. Expensive house, luxury cars, private schools for the kids, regular traveling. But that wasn't all. Leon turned the page. For the past 3 years, Edwin had been actively investing in various startups and venture capital projects. Most of them turned out to be unsuccessful. By my calculations, he lost at least $400,000 on these investments. "That explains why he kept asking me for money," I muttered. "But I'd never given him such large sums of money. He wasn't just borrowing from you." Leon looked serious. "And that's where the most disturbing part comes in. He'd borrowed some of the money from people who weren't known for being patient with debtors." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You mean loan sharks?" "Yes," Leon nodded. "Not the most criminal elements, but tough enough to cause serious problems if the debt isn't repaid on time." "And when is that deadline?" I asked, already guessing the answer. In 2 weeks, Leon closed the folder. About $150,000. Now the picture began to take shape. The desperate financial situation, the looming due date, the news that I'd sold the company for $17 million. Edwin saw the solution to all his problems, But why had he chosen such a difficult and risky path? I still don't understand, I said. If he needed the money, why not just ask for it? I wouldn't give him 17 million, but 150,000 to get him out of trouble. Maybe. Maybe he's already exhausted your trust with previous loans, Leon suggested. Or the amounts he needs are much larger than we think. He was silent for a moment, as if deciding to say something else. There is something else, Bertha. A month ago, Edwin tried to get power of attorney over your finances. What? I was stunned. How is that possible? He went to a lawyer in Charlottesville, Leon explained. Claimed you were suffering from early-stage dementia and needed help with asset management. Luckily, the lawyer was conscientious and refused to do the paperwork without your personal presence and a medical report. I shook my head, trying to realize the depth of the betrayal. How did you know about this? Virginia's legal community isn't that big. Leon smiled weakly. I have acquaintances at almost every reputable firm. When I started investigating, a few phone calls helped me find out this information. And now what? I asked, feeling devastated. Now we need to meet a man who can tell us more about Edwin's financial affairs and his creditors. Leon looked at his watch. He should be here in half an hour. Who's that? A private detective I sometimes work with on complicated cases. His name is Vernon Crosby, an ex-cop with extensive connections. Exactly 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Martin, who had been in the house the whole time, went to open it. A minute later, a short, stocky man of about 60, with shrewd dark eyes and a neatly trimmed gray mustache, entered the office. Mrs. Holloway. He shook my hand. Nice to meet you, though the circumstances are certainly unpleasant. Likewise, Mr. Crosby, I replied. Just Vernon. He sat down in the chair Leon had indicated. I've managed to gather quite a bit of information about your son's financial situation. He pulled a folder out of a worn leather briefcase, much thicker than the one Leon had shown me. Edwin Holloway, 42, married to Celia Holloway, née Pierce, 2 children, Olivia, 15, and Liam, 13. He is employed as a consultant with Archer Consulting, with an annual income of about $120,000. Celia owns a small event management agency that has been operating at a loss for the past 2 years. Vernon turned the page. Mortgage on a house in Windsor Farms, $600,000. Monthly payment about $4,000. 2 leased cars, an Audi Q7 and a Lexus RX. Total monthly payment about $2,000. Private school for the kids, $40,000 a year for both. Credit cards, 6 of them. Total debt about $70,000. He continued listing debts and expenses, and with each figure, I realized more and more how desperate Edwin's situation was. His monthly obligations were almost double his income. How is he even keeping afloat? I asked when Vernon had finished listing. For the last 2 years, mostly by borrowing and lending, the detective replied, including the money you gave him. But that's not what's most interesting. He pulled out some photographs. These pictures were taken 3 days ago, the day before your dinner at the Lawrence. The pictures showed Edwin meeting 2 men of unpleasant appearance outside some bar. This man, Vernon pointed to a tall man with graying whiskers, is Raymond Collins, known in certain circles as the Ray Lender. He's a high-interest private lender. Not exactly legal, but not criminal enough to attract serious police attention. And the other one? Leon asked. Harvey Shelton, Vernon frowned. His specialty is persuading debtors to pay on time. Not a very nice man. I felt a chill creep into my bones. Do you think they were threatening my son? More like a reminder of an impending due date, Vernon answered evasively. These people begin with friendly reminders, but if the debt is not repaid on time, the methods become more persuasive. And how much does Edwin owe to this Raymond? Leon asked. About $150,000, according to my figures, with interest, which is increasing every week, replied Vernon. The repayment is due in 12 days. That explains the rush, Leon muttered. There's something else, Vernon continued. After you left the restaurant, I followed your son and his family. They stayed there for about an hour, and then Edwin took his wife and children home and went to the drugstore. He pulled out another picture of Edwin coming out of the convenience store with a small bag. I managed to find out what he bought: an over-the-counter sleeping pill and a bottle of brandy. He then drove to your house and waited for about an hour before leaving. I closed my eyes, trying to deal with the wave of emotions. What was he planning? Forcibly give me sleeping pills? Or something even worse? After that, he came home, Vernon continued. But the next morning, he came to see you again. Seeing that you were gone, he started calling hospitals. Hospitals? I was surprised. Yes, he was obviously afraid something had happened to you. The detective nodded. Or maybe he wanted to make sure you didn't seek medical attention after the incident at the restaurant. What about Celia? I asked. She was active in the search, too. Called your acquaintances, neighbors. But another interesting thing is that yesterday they had another visitor. Vernon showed a photograph of Raymond Collins entering Edwin's house. He was there for about 20 minutes. When he came out, he didn't look happy. Apparently, Edwin was unable to provide the money he had promised, suggested Leon. Probably, Vernon agreed, and I doubt Raymond gave him an extension. I got up and went to the window. I had learned more about my son in the last few days than I had in years, and each new discovery was more painful than the last. Is there any chance that Edwin is in danger? I asked without turning around. If he doesn't pay back his debt in time, definitely, Vernon answered. Raymond Collins was not the kind of man to forgive debts. I turned to the men. What would you do in my place? Leon and Vernon looked at each other. It's a difficult question, Leon began cautiously. On the one hand, Edwin has betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. On the other hand, he's still your son, and he's in trouble. If you're asking for my professional opinion, Vernon added, I'd recommend distancing yourself from the situation. People like Edwin rarely change. If you pull him out of this hole, he'll soon dig a new one, even deeper. I walked back to my chair and sat down, feeling the weight of the decision. What about grandchildren? I asked. They shouldn't have to suffer because of their parents' mistakes. That's right, Leon nodded. We've already discussed educational trusts. They'll be protected regardless of your decision about Edwin. I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts. My entire life had been dedicated to creating a secure future for my son. I'd worked without rest, sacrificed my personal life, my health, everything for him. And this is how he repays me. I need to talk to him, I finally said, face to face. I want to hear the truth from him. It's risky, Vernon warned me. He's a desperate man in a desperate situation. I won't meet him alone, I assured him. Maybe here, in the presence of Leon and Martin? Leon hesitated for a moment. It's possible. We can arrange the meeting so that you'll be completely safe. But be prepared for him to deny everything, Vernon warned. People seldom admit to such things, even when they're backed up against a wall. I understand, I nodded. But I need to see his reaction when I tell him I know about the sleeping pills in the juice. I want to see his eyes at that moment. Okay, Leon agreed. When do you want to do it? The sooner the better, I decided. Tomorrow, I'll arrange it. Leon nodded. In the meantime, we need to discuss what you're going to tell Edwin, and more importantly, what you plan to do next. Vernon started gathering his papers. Dash. I think my part of the job here is done. If you need any further information or surveillance, let me know. Thank you, Vernon, Leon said as he escorted the detective to the door. You've been very helpful. When it was just the two of us again, Leon returned to his chair. So, Berta, he looked at me carefully. What decision are you going to make? I was silent for a long time, weighing all the options, all the consequences. I can't just give him the money after what he's done, I finally said. It would mean that his actions went unpunished, that such behavior was acceptable. I agree, Leon nodded. But I also can't let him get into serious trouble with those loan sharks, I continued. Not for his sake, but for the sake of the grandchildren. They shouldn't grow up in a family where their father is threatened or, worse, harmed. Leon rubbed his chin thoughtfully. There are several ways to solve this dilemma. For example, you could pay the debt directly to Raymond Collins, bypassing Edwin. That would keep your son safe, but not give him access to the money. Is that possible? I asked. With Vernon's help, yes. Leon nodded. He could arrange a meeting with Collins and explain the situation. What about the rest of Edwin's debts? That's his problem, Leon said firmly. You can protect him from immediate danger, but you can't take responsibility for his entire life. He's a grown man, Bertha. It's time he faced the consequences of his decisions. I nodded, feeling a weight begin to fall from my shoulders. The decision had been made. All right, I said. We'll pay off the debt to Collins. But first, I want to talk to Edwin. I want him to know that I know. Fair enough, Leon agreed. I'll arrange a meeting for tomorrow. And today, you need to rest. The last few days have been very stressful. He was right. I felt drained emotionally and physically. But in a strange way, I also felt a new resolve, a new strength. It was as if finally facing the truth about my son had freed me from the illusions that had held me back for years. One more thing, Leon said as I was about to leave the office. What do you plan to do after you talk to Edwin? Go back home? I wondered. The prospect of returning to an empty house full of memories didn't appeal to me, especially knowing that Edwin could show up there at any moment. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe I really should start a new life somewhere else. If you decide to leave, I'll help you with all the legal formalities, Leon offered, selling the house, transferring the assets, whatever it takes. Thank you, I smiled gratefully. You're a true friend, Leon. That's what friends are for, he shrugged. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. I went up to the guest bedroom and sat on the bed, staring out the window at the quiet street. The sun was slipping towards sunset, coloring the sky in shades of orange and pink. A beautiful, peaceful evening that was such a contrast to the storm in my soul. I pulled out my phone and looked at the latest messages from Edwin. Mom, please respond. We're freaking out. If you don't make yourself known by tomorrow, I'm going to go to the police. Mom, whatever happened, we can discuss it. Please call. Fake concern, fake worry, or maybe real fear, but not for me, but for myself, for my financial security, for the possibility of avoiding the consequences of my actions. I typed a short message. I'm fine. Talk to you tomorrow. Come to Leon Ellison's place at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, alone. After sending the message, I turned my phone off, not wanting to see a response. Tomorrow would be plenty of time for conversations, explanations, and decisions. Tomorrow I would meet my son face to face and finally tell him the whole truth about my feelings, about his betrayal, about a future that would now be nothing like he'd planned. It won't be easy, but I am Bertha Holloway, the woman who built an empire from nothing, a woman who has survived the death of her husband, financial crises, endless hardships and betrayals. I will survive this ordeal, and maybe I'll finally find the peace I deserve. The morning greeted me with an unexpected calm. I woke long before dawn and lay staring at the ceiling for a long time, mentally preparing myself for my upcoming meeting. Strangely, instead of fear or anxiety, I felt determination. It was as if the last doubts had dissolved overnight, leaving only crystal clarity. Leon met me in the kitchen with a cup of freshly brewed coffee and a carefully prepared breakfast. "How are you feeling?" he asked, scrutinizing my face. "Ready?" I answered, surprised at my own calmness. "Leon, I want to sign the new will today. I'll see Edwin later." He nodded without surprise, as if he had expected it. "I've prepared all the documents. We can do it after breakfast." Did Edwin reply to my message? Yes. Leon pulled out his cell phone. He said he'd be at my place at 4 sharp. He asked if you were okay and why you were here. What did you say? That you're fine and you'll explain everything when you meet me. He put the phone away. Martin would be home in case Edwin showed up with someone else or tried to make a scene. I nodded, grateful for the foresight. After breakfast, we moved to Leon's office, where he spread the new will documents on the table. I scrutinized each page, making sure that all my wishes had been taken into account. The bulk of my fortune was now divided between educational trusts for Olivia and Liam and several charities supporting women in business and children who'd lost parents, subjects close to my heart. Edwin was left with a minimal amount that couldn't be challenged in court. "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" Leon asked as I picked up the pen. "It's a big step. I'm absolutely sure," I answered firmly and signed my name. Something changed in that moment. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying all these years, the weight of unreasonable expectations, of disappointment, of constant concessions, was finally lifted from my shoulders. I felt free. For the remaining hours before the meeting, Leon and I discussed the practical aspects of my possible move. I was leaning more and more toward the idea of starting a new life somewhere by the ocean, a dream I'd been putting off for far too long. "Florida, Carolina, or California?" Leon asked, showing me the options on the map. "North Carolina," I decided. Not too far from Virginia, but far enough to get a fresh start. "And a mild climate year-round." "That's a good choice," Leon said. "I know a realtor in Wilmington who could show you some decent options." At 3 o'clock, Martin prepared tea and laid it out in the living room where the meeting was to take place. "I'll be in the next room," he told me. "If anything goes wrong, just call me." I smiled gratefully. Martin's presence was reassuring, though I doubted Edwin was capable of physical aggression. His methods had always been different: manipulation, lies, emotional pressure. At precisely 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I was sitting in a chair by the fireplace, Leon across from me. We exchanged glances, and he went to open the door. I heard muffled voices in the hallway, then quick footsteps, and Edwin burst into the living room. He looked haggard, circles under his eyes, a wrinkled suit stubble on his chin. "Dash, dash, Mom!" He rushed toward me as if he wanted to hug me, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Edwin," my voice sounded calm and detached. "Sit down, please. We need to talk." He froze, clearly not expecting such a welcome, then slowly lowered himself into the chair across from me. "What's going on?" He shifted his gaze from me to Leon and back again. "Why did you disappear? Why haven't you been answering your cell phone? We were freaking out with worry." Dash, dash. Really? Question mark. I let the irony slip into my voice. "Worried about me or the money you might lose?" Edwin looked genuinely shocked. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Of course we were worried about you. You disappeared in the middle of dinner without saying a word. We called all the hospitals. I came to your house several times." "Why did you put sleeping pills in my juice?" I asked bluntly, cutting off his outpouring. Edwin froze with his mouth open. Something akin to fear flashed across his face, but he got over it quickly. What? He tried to laugh, but it was unconvincing. What sleeping pills? What are you talking about? Zolpidem, Leon said calmly. At twice the therapeutic dose, we tested the contents of the drink in the lab. It's some kind of mistake. Edwin shook his head, but his eyes were running, avoiding meeting my gaze. I didn't spike anything. Why would I do that? The question I've been asking myself for the past few days. I leaned forward. Why would my son put me on sleeping pills? What was he hoping to get when I passed out? Mom, this is nonsense. Edwin stood up, his face contorted with indignation. I don't know who told you that, but it's nonsense. I would never. The restaurant security guard saw you do it, I interrupted, when I was talking to the waiter. He kept the glass and we checked its contents. Edwin turned pale but continued to stand his ground. Some guard made a mistake. Maybe he saw me add ice to your juice or lemon. Mom, you can't seriously think I wanted to hurt you, can you? I don't know if you meant to hurt or just manipulate, I replied calmly. But I do know the facts. There were sleeping pills in my juice. You put something in my drink. Afterward, you all left to dance, leaving me alone with the glass. Edwin collapsed back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. The room was silent for a few moments. It was Celia's idea, he finally said in a low voice. I felt something shatter inside. Despite all the evidence, part of me still hoped that there had been a mistake, that Edwin was innocent. But here he was, confessing. Explain, I demanded. Edwin raised his head. There was something different in his eyes now, not fear or shame, but calculation. We're in desperate straits, Mother, he began. Debts, loans. I owe people who don't joke about money. I needed help. And you decided to drug me instead of just asking? My distrust was genuine. I did ask, he exclaimed, many times, but you always refused or didn't give me enough, and now I need a serious sum, or else, he hesitated, or else Raymond Collins will send Harvey Shelton to you. Leon finished calmly. Edwin turned sharply toward him, shocked. How do you? We know a lot of things, Edwin, Leon said, about your debts, your failed investments, your meeting with Collins the night before dinner, about how you tried to get power of attorney to manage your mother's finances by claiming she was suffering from dementia. That's not true. He jumped up. I never said my mom had dementia. We have a deposition from a Charlottesville lawyer, Leon parried. Do you want me to show you the written statement? Edwin sank back into his chair, defeated. I'm in a desperate position, he repeated quietly. You don't understand. These people, they could harm not only me, but Celia, the children. And that's why you decided to put me on sleeping pills. I shook my head. What was next in your plan? I pass out, so what? Edwin was silent for a long time, then answered without raising his eyes. We'd take you home. Celia would have stayed with you for the night, taking care of you. And in the morning, you'd find that you'd signed a power of attorney to manage part of your finances. Jesus, Edwin, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Do you realize that this is a felony? I was desperate. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I know what I did was awful. I've messed up. I've done stupid things. But I'm your son, your only child. Will you let me get into trouble when you can easily help me? That was the Edwin I'd known all my life. First, create the problem, then play on the guilt to avoid the consequences. For years, that tactic had worked, but not today. I will help you, Edwin, I said slowly, but not in the way you expect. His face brightened, full of hope. I knew you would understand. Mom, I swear, I'll pay back every cent. I'll pay your debt to Raymond Collins. I interrupted. Directly, not through you. It will save you and your family from immediate danger. Thank you. He breathed a sigh of relief. What about the rest of your debts? The mortgage, the kids' school. The rest is your responsibility, I said firmly. Perhaps it's time to live within your means, Edwin. Sell the house you can't afford. Reconsider school expenses, cars. His face stretched in disbelief. But, but what about the children? Their education? I've taken care of Olivia and Liam's education. I nodded at the file on the table. I signed a new will today. The bulk of my fortune is divided between educational trusts for your children and charitable organizations. Edwin stared at me, not understanding. What about me? He finally asked. What's left to me? The minimum amount required by law so you can't contest the will, I answered calmly. He looked at me as if he couldn't believe his ears. You're disinheriting me? His voice shook with indignation. Because of one mistake? Because of betrayal, Edwin. I looked him straight in the eye. You betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. You were willing to jeopardize my health, perhaps even my life, for money. I never meant to hurt you, he exclaimed. It was a harmless sleeping pill, just to make you sleep soundly. Harmless? Leon raised his voice. A double dose of Zolpidem for someone your mother's age, combined with the alcohol she drank at dinner, could cause serious breathing or heart rhythm problems. Yeah, I didn't know. Edwin looked confused. Celia said it was safe, and you took her word for it when it came to your mother's health? Leon shook his head. Or did you just not want to know the truth? Edwin was silent, his head down. I looked at him and felt not anger, but a deep, overwhelming sadness. Somewhere in the process of growing up, this man had ceased to be the boy I loved so much, turned into someone alien, someone with whom I had nothing in common but biological bonds. I'm leaving Richmond, Edwin, I said quietly. Starting a new life somewhere else. What? He looked up, his face contorted with shock. You can't just leave? I can and I will, I said firmly. There's nothing to keep me here anymore. What about me? The kids? Your grandchildren? I'll keep in touch with my grandchildren if they want to, I said. The education trusts will secure their future. But with you and Celia, our paths are diverging. You can't do that, he said, a threatening tone in his voice. I'm your son, your family. Family doesn't betray each other, Edwin. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. Family doesn't manipulate, lie, or use loved ones for money. I will sue. He jumped up, too. I'll contest the will. I'll prove that you're incompetent. Try, Leon said calmly. We have all the medical reports on Berta's full physical and mental health. We also have proof of your attempt to drug her. I think the court will be very interested in this story. Edwin looked at him furiously, then back at me. You're going to regret this, he hissed. When you're all alone, with no family, no support, you'll regret it. Maybe, I nodded. But it's better to be alone than with people who only see you as a wallet. Edwin turned abruptly and headed for the exit. At the door, he stopped and tossed over his shoulder. This isn't over, Mom. You'll hear from me again. There was silence in the room after he left. I sank slowly into the chair, feeling the adrenaline leave my body, leaving me tired and empty. You did great, Leon said quietly, sitting down next to me. A lot of people would have broken under that kind of pressure. I feel like I've lost my son, I admitted. Although maybe I'd lost him a long time ago, I just didn't want to admit it. You've done your best, Berta. Leon took my hand. Now it was time to think about yourself. I nodded, realizing he was right. For too long I'd lived for others. The company, the employees, Edwin. It was time to start living for myself. 3 weeks later, I stood on the porch of my new home in Wrightsville Beach, a small coastal town in North Carolina. The white two-story house with blue shutters was located just 2 blocks from the ocean. The veranda overlooked a manicured garden with blooming magnolias and old oaks hung with Spanish moss. My house in Richmond was sold quickly and for a good price. I gave most of my furniture and personal belongings to charity, leaving only the essentials and a few photographs and mementos dear to my heart. A new beginning required getting rid of the weight of the past. I hadn't heard from Edwin since that day at Leon's house. He hadn't called. He hadn't written. He hadn't even tried to prevent the sale of the house. Perhaps he realized he'd lost that battle, or maybe he was just waiting for another time to attack. Either way, I was ready. Leon helped me take all the necessary legal steps to protect my assets and my new residence. Olivia sent me a text a week after I moved in. A short, tentative, "Grandma, did you really leave? Daddy says you don't want to see us anymore." I answered her, explaining that I would always welcome her and Liam, that the educational trusts set up for them had gone nowhere, and that my doors were always open to them whenever they wanted to come. She didn't respond, and I didn't insist. Time would tell if the grandchildren would be able to form their own opinions or remain under their parents' influence. Leon called every week, checking to see how I was settling in. He promised to come to visit as soon as he was done with his current affairs. I looked forward to his visit. Leon had become not just a friend, but an anchor to my past life, a reminder that not all relationships end in betrayal. I sipped my morning coffee, savoring the cool breeze off the ocean. For the first time in decades, I had no schedule, no deadlines, no obligations to others, just me and time that I could use as I saw fit. Yesterday, I signed up for a watercolor painting class at the local community center. Tomorrow was going to attend a book club meeting. Next week, I plan to start volunteering at the animal shelter. Small steps toward a new life filled with things I've always wanted to do, but put off because of work or family commitments. My cell phone vibrated, signaling an incoming message. I glanced at the screen and smiled when I saw Leon's name. Finished with things sooner than expected. "I can come over this weekend if you invite me." I quickly typed a reply. "Would love to see you anytime. The weather is lovely, the ocean is warm. Bring your bathing suit." Putting the phone away, I looked again at the ocean shimmering in the distance. This might not be the life I had planned, not the family I dreamed of, not the relationship I hoped to build with my son. But this is my life, my own well-deserved life after decades of labor and sacrifice, and I was determined to live it on my own terms, savoring every moment, every sunrise and sunset, every new encounter and discovery. Edwin's betrayal had broken my heart, but it had also freed me, free from illusions, from guilt, from endless attempts to earn a love that never existed. Now I could be me. Not a mother, not a businesswoman, not someone's support or ATM, just Berta Holloway, a woman who was finally living for herself. I finished my coffee and headed into the house. Today was a beautiful day for a walk on the beach, for new beginnings, for the life I'd been putting off for so long.